Hey, what's up YouTube? We're back with a theory video, and today we're going to be talking about Zorro, specifically Zorro's history and his lineage. Now, originally when I wrote this theory, I predicted, like most of us, that Zorro's father was Shimotsuki Ushimaru. That has since been proven to be not the case. By Oda himself, he pretty much just said it. He said Zorro's dad is not Shimotsuki Ushimaru. Plain as day, just like that. So that sucks. But that doesn't mean that Zorro is not still A, from Wano, and B, possibly a member or related to the Shimotsuki clan. And this is something that I've sort of come up with in my head based on some things that I've seen throughout the story and some things that we've noticed in Wano specifically in this arc. So to jump right in, I'm just going to start with the fact that Zoro is 21 years old. Now, that's really significant because, as we know, Kaido officially took over Wano when Oden died. Now, that was about 20 years ago. That was exactly 20 years ago, almost. So, it's very possible that Zoro was possibly born in Wano and then transported to Shimotsuki village after Kaido took over. Because, I mean, not many people, I'm sure, wanted to stay there. Plus, if Zoro was a member of a royal or even just wealthy family, they probably would have had the means of escaping Wano. And we've known that other people have escaped Wano despite it being an isolated country before. The main person being Shimotsuki Kozuburo, who went and started, or founded, I should say, Shimotsuki village in the East Blue, which is where Zoro ended up. Now, that was 55 years ago. Zoro was born 21 years ago. Other people that we know who have left Wano, of course, are Kinemon and Momo. Kinemon smuggled Momonosuke out of Wano along with the other surviving scabbards who jumped forward 20 years. Raizo and Kanjuro, they left Wano with Momo, and they just managed to get away from Kaido and Orochi, who I'm sure maybe weren't looking for them, but were probably a little bit on edge, specifically Orochi, not so much Kaido. But, you know, because of the prophecy that Lady Toki said, speaking of Lady Toki, she would be the other person who we know who's left Wano. Actually, I don't know if Lady Toki left Wano. I don't know if she was born in Wano. I know that she knows, and she specifically stated that her family was from Wano, and that's where she was trying to get to. So if her family was from Wano and she wasn't born there, that would mean that either she herself left or she was born outside of it and her parents were the ones who left. Either way, we've known for a while that people can leave Wano even though they're not supposed to. Oden left Wano even though he wasn't supposed to. So it's definitely possible. Now, why would they go to the East Blue? Well, like I said, 20 years ago, Kaido and Orochi officially took out Oden and took over the rest of Wano. And 55 years ago, Kozuburo left and founded Shimotsuki village. Now, it's never actually stated when he founded the village. It's only stated that he left 55 years ago and that after leaving, he founded Shimotsuki village. There's no explanation as far as the time that went by between those two events. And that's actually important because one of the kids in the village, when we see Zoro's flashback, he says that, hey, the village was founded by pirates. Now, they never actually say that Shimotsuki Kozuburo was a pirate, but it seems like the main reason why people leave Wano in general is to go be pirates, or just to explore in general, which in the One Piece world is kind of like being a pirate. So it's very possible that after Kozuburo left Wano, he had a few years of being a pirate, got to the East Blue, and decided, you know what, I'm just gonna set up here, set up shop, and make this, you know, my place, my home. Now, another thing that's important is that Kozuburo, when he was in Shimotsuki village, when we see him in the flashback, he has a couple swords that he made, and he says himself that they're not particularly high quality. But of the swords that we know he made, the two high quality ones, one of them, Enma, belonged to Odin at that time, and the other one was in possession, or the other one was possessed by Kuina, or Kuina's, Kuina. It was basically hers. Her grandfather Kozaburo made it, passed it down to his son, who then passed it down to Kuina. And that's really interesting because it's shown specifically amongst the Shimotsuki clan that samurai stay with their swords even in death. The samurai swords are placed at the grave of the samurai. We saw with Ryuma that his grave was robbed, and that's really important because as far as we know, the only time that swords from Wano leave Wano is when they leave with people from Wano. Kozaburo left and brought the Wado Ichimonji, which is why that was in the East Blue. Ryuma's grave was robbed by Gecko Moria, who stole the sword and Ryuma's body, so that's why that sword was outside of Wano. It was in the Grand Line. However, there's one sword that's unaccounted for that we know is from Wano, but we didn't find it in Wano, and that's actually Zoro's sword, the Sandai Kittetsu. When we first see the Sandai Kittetsu, it's in a sword shop in Logtown. There's no explanation as far as how it got there. The sword shop owner knows that it's cursed, and because of that, he's been refusing to sell it to anyone. And the first person to come along and basically prove that he's worthy of it is Zorro, which is why he ends up taking it. Now, I think when you start trying to investigate how that sword got out of Wano, you start to understand a little bit more how Zorro might have possibly gotten out of Wano, if that is where he's from. Because if the sword doesn't leave the side of the samurai, unless the samurai leaves Wano, that means that there had to have been somebody else who left Wano relatively recent enough for that sword to be in that shop owner's hands, and he hasn't sold it yet, or nobody's come along that's been worthy of it yet. It had to have been there for not quite that long of a time period, because we know there are strong people passing through Logtown. It's one of the last towns you get to before you enter the Grand Line if you're coming from the East Blue. So that sword shop owner has to see hundreds of pirates a year coming into that shop. Not to mention Tashigi was there. So if Tashigi is there, stationed there with Smoker and a bunch of other Marines who, we've seen Marines use swords plenty of times, between the Marines and the pirates passing through Logtown, you're telling me there hasn't been anybody who's been strong enough to use that sword over the past, we'll say 55 years, as long as Kozaburo's been there? So there's a very strong chance that that sword actually made it out of Wano pretty recently, especially considering the fact that Tenguyama, the man who made the sword, is still alive and has other swords that he made. The one I believe he carries, he made. So that would mean that Tenguyama, because he made it, he had to have made it and given it to somebody, which couldn't have taken place during the same time that Kozaburo was leaving Wano, because he would have already been gone, and whoever he left with would have already been gone by the time Tenguyama made the Sandai Kittetsu. So it had to have been given to somebody who left after Kozaburo left. Now, if Zoro is in fact from Wano, it's very possible that when Kaido and Orochi took over, whoever Zoro's parents were decided they wanted to leave, and they did so with Zoro. And if Zoro's father was a samurai and a member of the Shimotsuki clan, we're assuming, he probably had the Sandai Kittetsu with him. Now, if Zoro's parents were, or father, I guess specifically, was a samurai and a member of the Shimotsuki clan, that doesn't necessarily mean that he would have had to have been Oshimaru's son, because we know that the Shimotsuki clan was actually relatively big. There were actually two daimyo in Wano, both from the Shimotsuki clan. Ushimaru was the daimyo of Ringo, and Yasui was the daimyo of the I believe Hakumai region. So you have two Shimotsuki daimyo of two different regions, which means the Shimotsuki clan was probably pretty big, and not everybody there is going to be a daimyo or a royal. He might have just been a retainer. So if Ringo is destroyed, which we know happens when Kaido takes over, the samurai of Ringo along with Ushimaru rebel. It could be something similar where Zoro's mother and Zorro are left to basically escape Wano in case Ushimaru and the other samurai of Ringo die. Now, which we know happened. So let's run through a scenario here. Let's say there's a rebellion that's planned to happen. The samurai of Ringo, the Shimotsuki clan, decide that they want to rebel against Kaido. Whoever these samurai are probably have families. Those families were either A, killed, B, taken prisoner, C, moved to other regions, or D, left Wano. Now, the Shimotsuki clan, being a noble clan, would probably be the only ones with the resources to do that, or even the knowledge to do that. So yes, samurai typically are higher class citizens in this era of Japan, but the actual resources to put together a ship to get out of Wano unnoticed or under the distraction of a rebellion would probably take a quite amount of resources or even just money. So let's say the rebellion happens, it fails. Zoro's guardians, maybe his mom, takes Zoro and his father's sword and they leave Wano. Along the way, something happens. Maybe his mother dies, or they're attacked, or something happens that causes the sword itself to be stolen on the way to the Shimotsuki village in the East Blue, which is why they didn't have it when they arrived and why Zoro didn't grow up with it. But it would explain how it got to the East Blue specifically. What are the chances of there being a village in the East Blue founded by a member of the Shimotsuki clan, also in the same sea as a sword shop that houses a sword made by someone from Wano in Wano? The chances of that happening that's close in time frame are actually very slim. So I think Zoro and the Sandai Kittetsu are very, very closely linked in more ways than we realize. And actually, I think if we're investigating it even more, if you remember, Tenguyama, when we first are introduced to him, he actually has multiple swords in his possession. He has his sword, he has the Ami no Habikiri and Enma, which were entrusted to him, which were by Odin, which was supposed to be given to his children, Iori and Momonosuke. And he also has another one. He has the Nidai Kittetsu. And the Nidai Kittetsu wasn't made by Tenguyama, it was made by somebody else. Why does he have those swords? Why does he have specifically the Nidai Kittetsu? It's never explained who that sword is for, because if we know that typically the sword stays with its owner, that would mean that either A, the sword is his, or B, the sword belonged to somebody who wanted to give it to someone else, like Odin wanted to give his swords to his kids. So if that's the case, it's very possible that that sword also belongs to someone who had plans for it and maybe died, like Shimotsuki Ushimaru, or someone else from that rebellion who didn't make it back, or to see their families before they died, which is also very possible. And I think it also leads me to the next point of my theory, which is kind of unrelated, but I do think by the end of this arc, and by arc I mean Wano, I think Zoro trades in, essentially he upgrades the Sandai Kittetsu for the Nidai Kittetsu. As of right now, Enma and Wado Ichimonji are Owazamono grade swords, and the Sandai Kittetsu is his only Wazamono great sword. So it's like one of the, hundreds of named swords, but Wado Ichimonji and Enma are of the 21 great swords. The Nidai Kittetsu is also of the 21 great swords. So I think it'll be sort of symbolic by the end of this arc for him to return the Sandai Kittetsu to the man who made it, to Tenguyama, and exchange it for the Nidai Kittetsu, which is, it's mostly the same sword but just way stronger. So that would end with Zoro having 3 great grade swords, which is going to be another huge power up. It's kind of not necessarily a power up, but I think it'll just provide more balance to his overall repertoire. Also, I think with the whole King of Hell motif that he's kind of doing right now, it would make sense for him to have a sword that's even more cursed than the current cursed sword he has. So that I think makes sense as well. So my theory is that chances are when Zoro was born, he was probably born in Wano, smuggled out of Wano after the failed rebellion by the samurai of Ringo, going to the Shimotsuki village, because Wano's an isolated nation, so nobody really should know about the Shimotsuki village besides people who knew where Kozaburo was going, or who maybe also left Wano and managed to come back. Anybody who knows that information, chances are, is probably related to him in some way. Another member of the Shimotsuki clan, or another daimyo of Wano. Either way, they leave Wano with the intention of going where they know their people are, to Shimotsuki village in the East Blue. Along the way, something happens, the sword gets stolen, maybe Zoro's mom dies. Zoro is one of the few Straw Hats who we still don't know at least one of his parents. Like, I think Zoro, Brook, Frankie, and Chopper are the only Straw Hats that we still don't know at least one of their parents. We know who Luffy's dad is, we know who Robin's mom is, we know who Sanji's parents are, we know who else? Are there any other Straw Hats? No. So, Jinbei. Jinbei's so old, I don't think his parents matter. And Chopper's parents are reindeer. They don't matter. So, of the human Straw Hats, Brook, Nami, Frankie, and Zoro are the only ones who we still don't know who at least one of their parents are. And Oda has already said that he doesn't want to do the whole everybody's gonna have like a super important, super powerful parent thing, which is fine, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Zoro's parents are not still from Wano, or are not still maybe more important than Zoro might think they are. Because we've never even heard Zoro talk about his parents. Even Nami, we know, and Frankie, we know who raised them, but we don't know who their biological parents are. We really don't even know who raised Zoro. We don't know who his biological parents are, or where he went home to at night, and who was taking care of him. We just know he spent so much time at the dojo taking classes and fighting Kuina and losing. That's where he spent most of his time, but that's not where he lived. So Zoro's lineage is still a mystery, and I think this theory would shed some light on where Zoro comes from. We maybe don't need to see his actual parents, but just the story of how he came to be, I think, would give a lot more context as to who Zoro is as a person. Similar to Luffy, seeing how Luffy grew up just gave a lot more context to who Luffy is as a human being. We didn't necessarily need to see the details of his birth the same way we did with like somebody like Sanji. But still knowing where he was raised, who he was raised with, the type of environment that they were in, that really was important, and it I think gave a lot more light to Luffy as a character. I think we're gonna get the same thing from Zoro in this arc. Now, like I said, who his parents are, it probably won't really matter. Oda's already made that clear that they're not going to be super important, but I think just him knowing who his parents are is going to be big for him as an individual, and hopefully we get to see that in this arc. But anyway, if you guys appreciated this, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Be on the lookout for more videos, and also I read other manga too, so if you want to see any videos on something like Tokyo Revengers or My Hero Academia, let me know in the comment section and I'll get started on those too. All right, thanks guys, bye.